Hello, everyone, and welcome into Tigers Tonight. I'm your host, John Maddox, joined as always by the best co-host in all the land. We'll start with the man in the Windy City tonight. He is not in the palatial Marley Manor. He is up north where nobody really wants to inhabit except for Brian Moss from about this time of the year through March. Larry, how in the world are you, sir?
Well, I'm really good. I had an early flight, and I'm going to be back home first thing tomorrow morning, so I'm pretty good, other than being a little chilly. But I am going to enjoy some Chicago pizza here in a little bit. I'm going to make the most of that. But I enjoyed my bye week, like all Tiger fans. I'm pretty sure I enjoyed my bye week.
A much needed bye week. And Brian, how in the world are you, sir?
Not too bad. Enjoying the warm front that's coming in. Got my jorts on, so yeah, we're doing pretty good. Bringing the little south up north here. Jorts weather.
I was fixing to say, got your UCF gear already on. No, I'm just kidding. So Memphis coming off a bye week. I do want to, before we get too deep into this, those of you who know my history a little bit, I started kind of in this world back at good old, when I was there, it was WSMS 91.7 FM, Spirit of Memphis State Radio, all the way back in July of 1993, or August of 93. I was there in July of 94 when we flipped to WUMR, and I've shared it a couple times this week, but longtime program director, general manager, music director, sports director, news director. He held literally every job at the station and was one of my radio heroes. Malvin Massey passed away this past weekend, and really heartbroken for his family and his wife, Phyllis, and just want to send my best out to them. Big loss. Jeff Brightwell tweeted about it today, and we were talking. Me, Brightwell, Dan O'Brien, who's the producer for Learfield for the Tiger Sports Network over there, and just countless others. Malvin impacted our careers and our lives in one way or another, and WMR is one of only 8 full-time jazz stations in the country when they were still part of the University of Memphis, and before they moved over to the Crosstown Concourse and the Daily Memphian and that whole deal. But that man knew more about radio and jazz than I ever will, and he will be sorely missed. But on to other things. So Memphis and UCF coming up this week. We'll have Brandon from UCF Sports along here in just a few minutes to talk about all things Knights. UCF coming off a big win on Saturday over Cincinnati. It was a great game, although it could be a costly one, as UCF quarterback John Reese Plumlee, who's familiar to fans around here, played at Ole Miss, played baseball for the Rebs as well. Suffered a big hit in that game, kind of stood up, wandered around a little bit, and fell back down. And I just can't imagine, Larry, that UCF's going to take many chances with him with what just happened to Tua Tagovailoa and kind of the whole thing going around right now.
Well, and he's not a professional football player either. So this is a young man who you don't want to take any chances with at all. These are still young men. They're not kids, but they're still very young men, and we have to take all the precautions that we possibly can. There would be, I think I would be remiss if I didn't. I think we all would agree that it would almost be egregious at this point to put him back out there without being 100% sure, 110% sure that he is healthy.
Yeah, Tommy Tummerville and on that other sideline over there, unforgivable what he did to poor Gunnar Keel, putting him back out there. And back when Memphis played Cincinnati, and Keel had suffered a concussion the week before, he couldn't practice and was wearing sunglasses every day, and Tuberville rolled him out there, and Tank Jakes got knocked him woozy, and then he tried to put him back out there again, and he couldn't even stand up. But Gus Malzahn's going to be more careful. We know a lot more now. And so hope the young man's well. I don't ever want to see anybody hurt. He gives UCF an added dimension we'll talk with Brandon about. But, Brian, what do you think Memphis is feeling coming off this bye week?
I think maybe a little bit rejuvenated, because I think they really needed that break. And hopefully that it was a time to reflect on this 3-game losing streak to see what you're doing wrong, to just button it up. I mean, because when I go back and look, to me, it's not major changes that need to happen. It's just little minor tweaks here and there. So I mean, and in some ways that could be more frustrating because we talked about it before. It's like whack-a-mole. You fix one, another thing pops up, and it just they keep doing that. And so hopefully, they get things buttoned up and they come out swinging on Saturday. I mean, that's what they need to do because they can't. Body language. We'll find out pretty quickly how Memphis will respond, but they definitely need to come out swinging.
Muted.
Yeah, help find me my mic, wouldn't it? So, Larry, what is your thought coming off a bye week as a former player? What kind of emotions and what are you thinking about? You've been away from your team. We talked about that last week about how you hate everybody and everything at that point in the season. So, what's kind of your mindset coming off a bye week?
So, if you go into a bye week on a high, then you go into the bye week thinking, okay, everything's working. Let's just sort of take a pause and then get right back into our routine. But when you go into it on a losing streak, then now you're wanting to change things. You want to change up all because you're not, whatever we're doing is not working, right? And so it's sort of like you guys ever see that movie Tin Cup with Kevin Costner, and he's getting ready to play in the tournament, and all of a sudden he lost his swing, right? He loses his swing, and he's trying everything he can think of to try to find the swing, and I think that's where the Tigers were. They were losing in every way possible, right? And you're just trying to get back to basics. And what I would do in those moments would be to not do anything football related, get completely away from football, and then come back sort of like try to do a fresh start completely. And let's just start like it's the first game of the season. And that's probably what I would do in this case.
Brian, I thought it was interesting after the Tulane game. Seth Hennigan used the word reset about 43 times in a 5-minute press conference. And I feel like that's what Memphis needs is just to hold the power button down, wait 60 seconds, or hold the power button down, unplug the computer, wait about 60 seconds, plug it back in and turn it back on. And I thought Seth's choice of words there was kind of interesting because usually, we need to rest, we need the break. But he just said, we need a reset.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's what because when you see some of them on social media, on Facebook, what they did with their spare time, you got the sense that they did get away from football. They did, have time just to clear their heads and obviously come back to work this week and practice. I didn't see today's press conference videos, but it's my old saying. It's going to be interesting. So, but they needed to hit that reset, and I have a feeling that's what happened. Like I said, because just following some of them on social media, going home, just getting away from football. I think we'll see a different team come Saturday. We'll find out, but my hunch is that they'll be more focused than they have in games past.
Jeb just asked a good question here, and I think I'm right. It looks like 2013 was the last time Memphis lost 4 straight games, and that would have been Justin's. That been his second year. 14 would have been year 2 for him. Yeah, lost to, oddly enough, UCF, Houston, SMU, and then Cincinnati before picking up a win over UT Martin, and then we lost 3 to end the season. So, but Memphis is going to have to be very, very good on Saturday to avoid that happening for the first time since 2013. I was looking through the numbers here, and we'll say we'll have Brandon with UCFsports.com on here in a few minutes. The two offenses are virtually equal in scoring. Memphis is scoring right at 35 a game, UCF around 36. Memphis actually passing for more yards, but only rushing. They're 110 yards less per game. Both teams, Memphis 41% on third down, UCF 47%. UCF an astounding 73% conversion rate on fourth down to Memphis's 53%. One area that Memphis has a little bit of an advantage is in the red zone. Memphis has scored 94% of the time in the red zone, and UCF only 74% of the time. That number kind of jumped off the page at me, Larry, as an area where maybe Memphis can take a little bit of an advantage when they get inside the red zone. Now, last 3 weeks have been shaky, but Memphis has been a pretty good red zone team to this point this year.
Well, I think you're right, and we've done a really good job of cashing in when we get into the red zone. I think the trick this week is not just scoring field goals, but we need to get touchdowns. I think that's going to be a critical thing. But part of the scoring is what I forget who it was. I think it was you, John, that had Howard as your first half player of the year. I think that's 100% why, because he's been so consistent. So every time we get into the red zone, we've been able to cash in with points of some kind.
Memphis is fifth in the conference in touchdown percentage at 66.7%. They have scored 24 touchdowns and kicked 10 field goals inside the red zone. UCF has struggled in the red zone a little bit. They are only getting about, 57% of the time they are scoring touchdowns. So to me, that's kind of a big key. What we're going to do right now is we're going to step aside for just a moment. And when we come back, we will have UCFsports.com very own Brandon Helwig, friend of the program, as I like to say. We'll step aside for just a minute. You're watching Tigers Tonight. And we're back. My video didn't work, but that's okay. Brandon will bail us out of this. We're joined now by UCF Sports, publisher of the Rivals site, UCFsports.com, the one and only Brandon Helwig. Brandon, how are you, sir? It feels like it's been hours since you and I have talked.
I'm doing great. And I just talked with John for my podcast a few minutes ago. So very happy to always join you guys. You guys have always been cutting edge with this stuff. I know you've been doing these live streams for a little while. I'm starting to emulate what you guys do, but always enjoy being on and talking football with you all.
Well, let's get it started. It's funny because it's not funny. It's kind of sad, but last year Memphis came to UCF without Seth Hennigan, without the starting quarterback that they had kind of ridden all the way home. And this year it looks like most likely, I think you and I both agree that it'll be Mikey Keene coming off the bench, although he was the starter last year. So kind of a different situation. But what is the mindset? How does the game plan change with Mikey at quarterback versus JRP?
John Rice Plumlee. What's interesting about this whole thing is that's been, one of the big, I guess, fan debates the entire offseason and this season is who should be the starting quarterback. And Mikey Keene was the starter last year. He was a true freshman. Dylan Gabriel was the starter going, and he breaks his collarbone at the end of the Louisville game, which I think was game 3. And they really had no other choice but to throw in Mikey Keene. He did okay for a true freshman. He wasn't knocking anyone's socks off, in terms of what he did on the field, but he managed the game. He improved as the season went on. He led UCF to a bowl game. He was a starting. Get this. He's a starting quarterback when UCF beat Florida in a bowl game, which is a big deal to UCF fans. And, so they needed competition at that quarterback spot. And, like most other teams do these days, they bring in a guy from the transfer portal. And John Rice Plumlee, who, maybe people Memphis way are a little bit more familiar with him because that was a name. He started a bunch of games for Ole Miss back in 2019. And has always been regarded as a super athletic, running quarterback. You're not going to catch him in a foot race. At least most players won't. But, the passing stuff, the managing the game, throwing the ball, reading defenses, accuracy, that stuff's always kind of been his Achilles heel. And so he's been playing wide receiver. at Ole Miss, so he comes to UCF for a fresh start with an opportunity to compete for quarterback. And Gus Malzahn, I think, he's had different types of quarterbacks, but I think he loves those guys who, those true dual threat quarterbacks that can hurt you with their feet as well. And so, I mean, it wasn't a surprise. I mean, Gus brought him in to be the starter, but, as we heard, we don't get a lot of access, in terms of just seeing practices and seeing scrimmages. We get basically nothing, but just chatter from, donors who could attend, chatter from people connected to players in the team. We heard a lot of great things about Mikey Keene, about how he'd taken a huge jump in the off season. And a lot of the players, from what I understand, they were just absolutely shocked when John Rice Plumlee was named the starter, that they thought it was going to be Mikey Keene just based on how he was doing in preseason camp. So I think a lot of people were kind of waiting for this moment this past week against Cincinnati for Mikey Keene to finally get in the game to see how he looked, because he hasn't played at all. I think it's pretty clear that Gus made his decision, and Mikey's not his quarterback, at least not the kind of quarterback that maybe he wants. And so they were managing how they did the early part of the season. They had a true freshman, Thomas Castellano, who's the third string guy, kind of take the garbage time snaps. He got in there late in the Temple game, which UCF scored 70 points, so he was able to play a little bit. But they intentionally didn't play Mikey in order to preserve his red shirt. You can play in up to 4 games and still redshirt. But when John Rice, he has a tendency of not really wanting to slide all the time when he's out there running and he's trying to make a play and he's taking on defenders, and maybe it should have been targeting, I don't know, but he gets hit, as you mentioned earlier in the show. He got hit pretty hard in the head. Everyone wants to bounce up right away, but he falls back down to the ground. Didn't look good. He had the sunglasses on when he came back out to the field. So, yeah, I don't think he's going to play. But Mikey Keene, man, I'm telling you, that might have been the best quarterback performance based on what he did, the throws he made, the opponent he did it against. I mean, we can praise John Rice Plumlee all we want for, putting up great numbers against FAU and Temple, but that was FAU and Temple. And, against Louisville, didn't have a great game. Now, that ECU game was just a comedy of errors in a lot of different ways. If there was turnovers, there's rumors that ECU was leaked, and this is crazy, but it's out there. But there was rumors that Gus Malzahn had fired a graduate assistant of the week before the game, and there's legitimate rumors being circulated that he may have leaked signal information to ECU, and they might have had an advantage. I mean, that's straight. But the rumor is, is it fact? Is people speaking on the record? No, but I've heard that a ECU player told a UCF player after the game that he's like, man, y'all got a leak, and we knew what you were running. So. Is that an excuse? No, I'm not going to go that far. You go to ECU, it's a tough place to play. They were amped up to beat UCF, but that wasn't a great game for John Rice Plumlee either. So, we'll see what the weather holds in the Liberty Bowl. I know there's some doubt about what the forecast is, but I think a lot of people are honestly excited to see what Mikey can do in a full start.
Well, maybe Memphis can get in hold of that GA, because Memphis will definitely need some help. How big of a smile did you guys have when that the new Big 12 TV deal came out?
I mean, I almost feel bad talking about it, knowing the show I'm on. I feel kind of like I don't want to rub it in, but I was telling John earlier that, before I talk about that, my personal opinion, and I think if you polled UCF fans, I think I've seen this mentioned a bunch. We all wanted Memphis in the Big 12 with us. I mean, we wanted Memphis. We don't understand Houston. I mean, we understand why Houston. They're in a big market. They're in Texas, all that stuff. But when we look at the programs and the support of the city and all that stuff, I mean, we have a kinship with Memphis. And I think if you put it to a vote to our fans, we wanted you guys with us. So as far as that goes, I mean, it's kind of surreal, in terms of where UCF came from, 20 plus years ago, just barely moving into the 1A level. It was a big deal to beat Alabama, and a bad year for Alabama in 2000, and just going on the road for every game, and then going to the different leagues, CUSA, and then doing well there, and now in the American, and some of these seasons here last 5 or 6 years, undefeated national championship season in 2017. So it's just been a great ride for UCF, and I mean, everyone just kind of pinches themselves, because when you get in the Big 12, everyone's wondering, like, I remember Reese Davis, of Game Day. He was one of the hosts on the NFL draft earlier this spring. And, you're still hearing it about the Big 12. He was kind of giving a backhanded compliment to Cincinnati, and they had a bunch of guys drafted, obviously. And he was kind of saying, we'll see if, the Big 12 is a Power 5 conference going forward, So there was a lot of doubt about how the Big 12 is going to be perceived. But with the TV deal, I mean, I think it should solidify him as the number 3 conference, but, everyone's going to be behind the Big 10 and SEC anyway. But I think it's going to be better than the deals that the ACC currently gets and what the Pac-12 is going to get. So I mean, it's great news for UCF, and I mean, everyone's just really jacked up and excited, and I just wish you guys were coming along for the ride.
So let's talk about Gus, and he's someone that we know pretty well around here. Started out obviously Arkansas guy, and then goes to Auburn. So. And obviously, there's a lot of difference between him and Josh Heupel. So, talk about what Gus has brought to the program in his. I guess this is his second year now.
Yeah, you're talking about Josh Heupel. How about that? He's the coach of the number 1 team in the country. They just came out with the playoff
but they
rankings.
Still suck. And the reason the wind blows in Memphis is because it sucks in UT. But
oh yeah, I realize Tennessee is a sore spot, but I remember as a kid, I remember it was Chris Powers was the wide receiver, and he caught the touchdown that beat Tennessee in the Liberty Bowl. Actually, a fun fact is I lived next door to Chris Powers. He briefly lived next door to me, I think in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, so I knew who he was, and that was a fun game to see. But anyway, Gus Malzahn, that was such a strange time period for UCF, coming off of the COVID year, and Danny White was the athletic director, and he goes to Tennessee, and they had to do a search, Dan, I guess he struck out. I don't know who he tried to hire. We know he tried to hire other coaches.
You want to know a fun fact, Brandon? So John and I have lunch, and he and I are talking because Tennessee's open, and both jobs are open. John and I are just chatting in general, because the Memphis job had opened as well, and we were just talking, and I was like, well, who do you think they're going to go with, and who do you think Tennessee's going to hire? And John said Heupel. I mean, he just pulled that out of the blue, and I was like, wow. And on my way home from lunch, it was announced that Tennessee was hiring Danny White, and I was like, damn. What does John know? And I think you just pulled that out of your butt. I really do.
Yeah, I don't know if he really wanted to hire Heupel. I think that was his safe pick when he struck out on other candidates, because it seemed like that had to, because it wasn't an automatic hire. But yeah, to their credit, I mean, they're getting it done. But the thing is, UCF fans were happy. Now, they weren't happy to lose Danny White, because Danny White was a great athletic director, but they were honestly happy to see Heupel go. I mean, standards were so high, and whether it was realistic or not with, the Frost era and the undefeated season in 27. I mean, UCF wasn't going to win every single game. They weren't going to win the conference championship every single year, and it seems like that was where expectations were going. But, recruiting under Heupel, we really struggled. COVID didn't help at all when you had to recruit over Zoom. He didn't have the greatest personality. He was hampered by day one. This was a weird thing that I don't think many people know outside of UCF. But when Danny White hired Josh Heupel, he actually hired Randy Shannon to be the defensive coordinator before he offered the head coaching job to Josh Heupel. And so Heupel didn't have a say in who his defensive coordinator was. And that was a big deal, because he's going to run an offense that, I think they went even faster when he was at UCF. They're going to run down they're going to put the defense in some bad spots. And if you're the defensive coordinator, your stats are frankly going to look bad. And you could look at that 2020 game against Memphis and see what I mean by that. I mean, so they didn't get along, and they didn't recruit well, and things were kind of starting to trend downward. So honestly, everyone, I don't think any UCF fan was sad to see Heupel go, and it was kind of split on Gus at the very beginning, just because some people were just kind of wondering, is he all kind of tapped out? Is he, what's his energy going to be like, coming after that, such a stressful run at Auburn and dealing with all those crazy donors and that whole situation. But, I think he came in, he was rejuvenated. I think people who had their doubts when they watched the press conference in February 2021, they were, excited about it. He's recruited. And that's the thing, honestly, about Gus Malzahn. He's the first head coach, I'd say, that UCF has had that understands how to recruit at a high level. I mean, he understands relationships, personality, putting on a production, putting on a show. I don't feel any other UCF head coach really had that ability, and it's shown. I mean, when you look at who UCF's recruited, some of the players they've gotten, the teams that they've beaten to land these players. Everyone's kind of crossing their fingers on this year's class. There's some really highly recruited guys. There's like a 4-star defensive tackle, John Walker. From Kissimmee. UCF does this thing called Hometown Hero, where they try to keep the best players at home, and he has legitimate offers from Florida, Miami, Ohio State, Michigan. I mean, he can go anywhere. So UCF fans are kind of hoping that he's going to stay in the class, but even not even including him, he's recruited really well last year and this year, and transfer portal's been great. So I mean, honestly, everyone's excited. Everyone, when the season starts, everyone's what about the offense, this or that. But other than that, I mean, everyone's honestly pretty pleased with how Gus is doing in year 2.
UCF, if they're known for anything, explosive offense is probably at the top of that list. Talk about Ryan O'Keefe and what kind of he means. He seems like he's the kind of do everything guy for the Knights.
Yeah, he's really the number one playmaker, I'd say, on this UCF team. And he's been kind of, there's been a couple of games he disappeared early this year. I don't know if he was 100% or not, but it's all about getting him the ball and letting him make plays. I think he had one, that crazy game in 2020 in Memphis might have been his breakout in terms of just, flashing and making some plays. I know he had a long touchdown in that one, but I mean, he'll go down in history as one of those kind of iconic UCF players. Cause I'll tell you this story real quick. UCF played, obviously Florida in the Gasparilla Bowl at the beginning of last season, which was, a matchup. I mean, you were just talking about Memphis, Tennessee, and that, how you guys feel about Tennessee, it's probably the same feelings that UCF fans feel about Florida. And to match up in a bowl game, it was just down the road in Tampa at the Tampa Bay Bucs Stadium. And as UCF started to look like they were going to win, they were starting to pull away. And Ryan O'Keefe was running for a touchdown. And UCF had a former player named Otis Anderson who had just passed away. It was a tragic situation. I think his father was drunk and had killed him in a drunken rage. And it was a really sad time. And as he's running in for the touchdown, Ryan O'Keefe throws up the deuce sign, which Otis Anderson was number 2. And he'd always throw that up when he would score a touchdown. In fact, probably Otis Anderson's iconic play at UCF was against Memphis in the 2018 conference championship game. I think that touchdown that Otis Anderson scored, I think it might have been third quarter Memphis.
I do not recall this game.
Memphis had a big lead. I mean, that was the first game.
I don't recall this game.
After Mackenzie Milton had the devastating leg injury, and that was just such an emotional game. Everyone was like Ohana because Mackenzie was from Hawaii. Everyone's wearing the Hawaiian leis, flowers around their neck, and so that was just such a that game was just crazy. And I know Memphis had a big lead at 24-7 at halftime or something like that, and he maybe had a similar lead in the third quarter. But when Otis Anderson scored that touchdown and he threw out the deuces, I mean, that's kind of when I think if you ask UCF fans or anyone on the UCF team, I think that's when UCF, I don't think that gave UCF the lead. Maybe that got him within a score, but I think everyone knew that game was going to go their way. And so he was just such a beloved player at UCF. So when Ryan O'Keefe threw up the deuces scoring against Florida, whatever he does for the rest of his career, he's just going to be a legend in Night Nation.
Yeah, defensively, is the weak spot for the Knights defense, is it the secondary? Because it seems like rush defense, they do pretty well.
If you would have asked me this before the season, I would have been telling you the secondary is the strength. And that in the other areas, linebacker was a weakness and maybe defensive line, but I don't know. Secondary hasn't, they haven't forced a lot of turnovers this year. They have the play. I mean, the guys who are starting at corner are experienced that have been starting for multiple years between Devontae Brown and Corey Thornton and Brandon Adams in his second year playing. Justin Hodges has been playing for a few years. So, I'm kind of, but I would say the defense overall has played well. I think for the most part, other than that ECU game, I mean, they've limited teams to under 21, 20 points a game, something like that. ECU was an anomaly. That ECU was the only game I would have said it was just poor all around, just poor offensively, defensively. ECU was able to, UCF, whether they had the plays or the signals or what was going on with those shenanigan rumors, I don't know, but the defense still couldn't stop ECU. So, defense, I'd say, played pretty good against Cincinnati. I mean, really well, honestly, against Cincinnati, stopped the run real well. But yeah, I guess if you had to name one that's maybe been a little bit, I don't know, disappointing is probably too harsh a word, but maybe not performing as well as maybe we thought. I would agree that would be how you would classify the secondary.
We were talking earlier in the show about red zone scoring and how that's really been an issue for UCF, and it's specifically touchdowns in the red zone. For a team that is such a high scoring team, why are they struggling, or what can you attribute to struggling in the red zone, especially a good running team like this?
Yeah, that's a great question. There were some missed opportunities against Louisville, I remember, and this past weekend there was a couple of red zone opportunities. They fumbled the ball. I mean, there was 2 fumbles by running backs who are typically sure-handed and coughed up the football. I don't know. The one thing about that's a positive when you talk about getting down in the red zone is that UCF they entered this season with kicker Daniel Obarski, and here's another Memphis link. He was the kicker that missed the game winner at Memphis in 2020.
I remember that.
And the thing is that, I don't know if you guys remember this, was on the TV broadcast, is that one of the backup quarterbacks was basically just giving him the business on the sideline for missing the kick. And they were just, Quadri Jones was his name. So he's been the kicker. He had been the kicker last year. Entering the season, he was the starter. He's been very inconsistent. And he struggled early in the season. They made a change to a true freshman named Colton Boomer. And ever since they did, knock on wood, he's 10 of 10 ever since they made the switch, 10 of 10 on field goals. So, I mean, we talk about red zone. I think UCF feels a lot better now than when they get down there. They have a kicker that's probably going to make it versus one where you just have no idea what's going to happen.
You can't get a better kicker name than Boomer. I mean, that's just like the kicker names that you see in the NFL are Suck Up and Miss It. I mean, those are just crap names, right?
It's great, though, because it's a little thing. Right. Now, there's a little thing the fans do now, okay? Every time he kicks the ball, if it's a PAT or a field goal, they yell boom. So the whole stadium just, when it comes off his foot, it's boom.
Now, kickers are still idiots. Don't get twisted, okay? They are. In general, that's just a fact. But
there's got to be an NIL deal for him somewhere.
There is. I'm looking at your comments. We got some UCF fans watching right now, and he's got a sock deal with Rock'em Socks. It's a local company, but he was kind of a viral thing, and I don't think this was even intentional. He went to Lake Mary High School, which is in this area, and in his yearbook, everyone could put a little quote. And I think his quote that he put on there was "kicking bombs and kissing moms." Was his little quote. I'm kind of surprised they printed that, knowing how these high schools are these days. But, I mean, that went viral. People took a picture of the yearbook. That's on a T-shirt they're selling now. So, yeah, he's got a little bit of that NIL stuff going on.
I think if you're going to be a kicker at any level, you got to have a little bit of swag, if nothing else. And he certainly has that. So last thing here before we let you run, what does UCF need to do to win on Saturday?
I think the biggest thing they need to do is not turn the ball over. I mean, you could say that about any game, any team, anywhere, but that was the problem at East Carolina. That could have, if UCF didn't beat Cincinnati, it would have been turnovers because they were moving the ball. They were in the red zone twice. If they would have punched those in, it wouldn't even have been close at the end. Cincinnati was able to take a late lead, and that forced UCF to march down the field for the game-winning touchdown. But if they would have scored and not coughed up the ball, now to their credit, the defense did force a safety after one of those turnovers, so they did get a couple points there. But they can't turn the ball over. I think everyone's anxious to see Mikey Keene, what he can do. Well, we're assuming he's starting. See what he can do in a full game start. For the most part, what we know about him, he's a great game manager. He's not going to, risk the football. He's going to protect the football and not put it in spots where it could be picked off. But we want to see how that goes. I think everyone has a lot of confidence in him. But it's for this defense to continue, playing well. This secondary that you alluded to, if Memphis is known for anything, I know they have a pretty good passing offense with Seth Hennigan, and they're going to need to bring it and not let him have a Holton Ahlers performance, because I don't know how UCF players, I'm sure they recognize it, but I mean, UCF's leaving and going to the Big 12. Teams like ECU, Memphis, I mean, they want to beat they want to beat UCF anyway, but they really want to beat UCF knowing this is the last matchup they're going to have. Ryan Silverfield's going to be fired up to beat UCF.
Holton Ahlers is like 33 years old. So, I mean, he's been there,
Yeah, he's been there forever. And that was, I mean, honestly, he played a great game. That's probably was the game of his career so far. I think this is his 5th year as a starter. And you know all about Holton Ahlers because, that was a week before they played UCF. I remember watching that game.
Did you say 15?
Yeah, maybe. His father's the PA announcer. Have you heard that one?
No,
oh, yeah.
No idea.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So, Brandon, tell everybody how they can follow UCF and keep up with all things Knights this week.
Yeah, well, you're looking at my username on Twitter. It's UCF Sports. My website's ucfsports.com. And, I always enjoy talking to you guys. I'll be heading to Memphis actually tomorrow. I'm going to be going up a little bit early and hitting all the – thank you, John, for the food recommendations. I'm definitely passing those along to our fans that are making the trip. And I'm sad. I'm bitter. It's kind of, kind of sad for me because I always enjoyed these games. And like I said, I wish you guys were coming with us to the Big 12.
Awesome. Well, Brandon, thanks for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you on Saturday.
All right, guys. Take care. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
Anytime. Brandon Helwig with UCFsports.com tonight. Thanks. Hey, and I do want to thank all the UCF folks for tuning in tonight. Appreciate it. Now for the important stuff. So, Brian, we'll start with you. How does Memphis win this game on Saturday?
They have to play flawless, and UCF has to not play flawless. I mean, UCF is going to have to beat themselves, honestly. I mean, I know I like to be the positive Paul, the homer pick. Memphis can win this game. But a lot of things have to go right. Like I said, UCF really has to shoot themselves in the foot for Memphis to win comfortably. If this is and I think weather's going to, come to play into it as well. If it's rainy, I think that hurts Memphis because Memphis has not run the ball well at all this year. So hopefully it's not, not raining. But yeah, they need to play flawless.
Forecast, the video wouldn't work for whatever reason there during the break, of course. It's just one of those days technology-wise. But weather forecast, temperatures in the 70s, about a 60% chance of rain. There's some question on whether or not it's going to get here or get out of here. One thing it is going to be is it's going to be quite breezy, winds 20 to 25 miles an hour all day out of the south. So that is going to make the passing game very, very interesting. Larry, Memphis has struggled to run the football. And the other thing that just kind of jumps out on me is Memphis is 10th in the league in sacks allowed, but UCF is 7th. And that's with an athletic running quarterback like JRP. And now you're going back to, and he's not a statue by any stretch, but Mikey Keene is a more kind of stand in the pocket and throw the ball down the field. So I think the Memphis, as we've said all along, the defensive line's got to get pressure and take some of the pressure off of the secondary.
Well, and what you want to do is put pressure on him and generate turnovers, because if you're going to win this game, we need to get back to what we were doing before the losing streak and generate turnovers, give short field. We already talked about how Memphis does a really good job in the red zone. Get them in the red zone, give a short field. If you're gonna score with the wind conditions and rain, what you want to have is a short field. And so generate turnovers, put Central Florida's defense in tough situations, because again, Seth has shown a propensity to run this year a little bit more. So give him a short field. Maybe we can generate a little bit of running game with Seth and, sort of mitigate some of the environmental problems that looks like we may be experiencing.
Well, and other than the kicking situation, Chris Howard is not kicking bombs and kissing moms, but I mean, he's been very reliable this year. UCF has had 5 punt returns of more than 20 yards, including 2 touchdowns. Memphis hasn't had any. Memphis is last in the AAC in kickoff return average at just 25 yards per return. UCF kicker Riker Casey is second in the AAC in touchbacks at 75%. As much of an advantage as I felt like we had going into Tulane, Brian, in teams, I feel like Memphis is at a decided disadvantage this week. And to me, if Memphis is going to win, you're going to have to steal something from somewhere. And to your point, UCF's going to have to play poorly. And you're going to have to steal something. But this week feels like just such a mismatch in the kicking, in the punt return coverage and kicking coverage games. This just feels like a major mismatch.
Yeah, I mean, and the special teams for Memphis played better, earlier in the year than they have been in this losing streak. They just need to fix it quick. This you can't afford to give UCF, points. You can't afford to not play well. This is not a team you can play against that play poorly in the first half and then kick it in the second half. I mean, it's just not going to happen. You're going to have to play all 4 quarters to beat this team.
This is definitely one of those, you're not going to win the game in the first quarter, but you can certainly lose it. Brian, I think it was you was talking about turnovers. UCF is -6 this year in turnover margin. Memphis is still +3. UCF just has 2 interceptions this year. Memphis still leads the AAC with 9, including 2 pick sixes. So even though Memphis has given up a ton of yards, they've made plays in the defensive game. And I just feel like that's where, Memphis is just going to have to steal points. And this is not Lou Holt's coach talk of, oh, UCF is so much better, blah, blah, blah. UCF is better, and Memphis is struggling, and UCF is coming off a high. But, Larry, that can swing both ways. UCF just beat Cincinnati, and now UCF, I think, is 25 in the latest college football playoff rankings that just came out about an hour and a half ago.
And they got Tulane next, right?
Yeah, and then Tulane is next week. Tulane's 19 in front of them. Could this be the classic trap game on the other end?
It could be. You certainly could see UCF maybe looking past a Memphis team that's struggling. That could certainly happen. You combine that with bad weather, and Memphis comes out off a bye week and they come out and get hot early. Yeah, that could happen. I mean, look, here's the bottom line, guys. UCF is faster than we are. I mean, I saw it last week. It was observable. If you watch the Cincinnati game, they're faster than we are. Defensively, I think they're probably a little bit bigger, or at least they looked better than we look on defense, and their running game is really, really good. So you're right, John. There's going to have to be something there that we look. These are 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old kids. I say young men, and yeah, I mean, mentally, they absolutely could be looking right past us. And what you have to do in that situation is jump on them early, get them down, and then put your foot on their neck and go, okay, you look past us. Well, it's going to cost you today, big guy.
Yeah, I agree with Guy over here in the comments. I don't think there's a scenario where UCF is really looking past
100%. Yeah, but we're trying to be positive here, right?
But no, I don't know that it's looking past Memphis in the sense of, oh, we've got this. I think it's knowing what you have in front of you and the possibilities you still have in front of you. But where UCF has a little bit of that advantage is they've been there before. Like, that's the advantage they have over Tulane. That's the advantage Cincinnati has over Tulane. Because even Justin told you when he started here, the biggest thing about winning is winning that first game, yes, but then it's knowing how to keep winning. And that's an advantage I think that UCF and Tulane, or UCF and Cincinnati, have. But this is not so much me saying, oh, UCF is dismissing Memphis, as it is UCF knows what's in front of them next week at Tulane, a chance to get back to where, look, let's be real. They feel like they rightfully belong in the New Year's Six, and they have proven over the stretch they've earned that right. So, yeah, I don't think this is, oh, Memphis is no good, because as amped up as the Tigers are to send UCF out of the AAC with a loss, Brandon and I talked about this on his show. This is really UCF's rival, so to speak. Now, Memphis hasn't exactly held up our end of the bargain most of the time with that. But this is still, other than USF, the war on I-4, but, let's be real. At least Memphis has been competitive, and these have been the top two teams in the AAC, and other people may not like that. Cincinnati, they finally kind of joined the fray, but the three of those have been the top three teams in the AAC. And I think UCF may want to prove a point on their way out the door. All right, so it's, as they say back on the farm, it's nut cutting time. So it's going to be, let's see, carry the one at 6:06 p.m. You will look up at the Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium scoreboard, Brian Moss, and it will say,
I will stay positive Paul, because I know you two will be negative Nancy. I'll have a bold prediction too. I don't know. I would love to be positive Paul, but it just doesn't look that way. I said before the season, Memphis would win either Houston or UCF. Didn't know which one, since they lost against Houston that they should have won. I'll just go ahead and say, I'll be the homer pick. I'll go ahead and say Memphis wins. Let's see. I'm going to say 33-30. Chris Howard kicks it at expiration to win it. It's the homer pick. One of us has to do it.
Is that your bold prediction as well?
Bold prediction is that they win. I was trying to think of something else. Yeah, bold prediction. I was gonna say that Memphis is going to lose the first half, but comes back to win. But I just don't see that. I think I can see a close game. I see it going back and forth. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I don't. I just think it's going to be a close game. And Chris Howard, I'll do the homer pick, like I said, 33-30, final seconds, right down the middle.
It may be relatively close. It may be a one-score game, but I'm thinking 41-28 UCF. They run the ball too well. They're just defensively, they're too good. I think Memphis will do some good things here. I do have a bold prediction. We'll have a defensive touchdown.
Wow. Before I looked at the weather forecast, I felt like this was going to be just one of those wild, crazy Memphis, Louisville, Memphis, SMU, Memphis, UCF, just one of those crazy up and down the field, back and forth games. And, one team or the other was going to kick a field goal at the end to win. But with the weather being possibly what it's going to be, I just think UCF runs the ball too well. And I don't know it's as much UCF runs the ball so well. It's that Memphis can't run the football, because the way you beat UCF,
bit of both.
The way you beat UCF is you have Mikey Keene attached to the hip of Gus Malzahn for extended periods of time, and Ryan O'Keefe getting Gatorade for extended periods of time. That's how you beat UCF if you're Memphis. I don't know that Memphis can do that. I don't know that they can, this to me is one of those games. It comes down to plays. If UCF gets in the 80s of plays, Memphis has no shot. If Memphis can keep them in the 60s to 70s, that's where the opportunity comes in. I just think this UCF team knows what's in front of them. They probably want it worse than Memphis does, because they have more to play for. Jeb just asked about Asa Martin. The plan is that he was going to get better during the off week and possibly go. But as you know, I mean, they're so forthcoming about injuries that, we really have no idea
Day to
until
day.
Yeah, he's day to day, just like we all are. He could be, and I told Brandon this on his show that Ace is a guy that could be a little bit of a difference maker because he can be versatile. Gabe is supposed to be back as well. Memphis has a few playmakers, Joe Skates, Steady Eddie Lewis. Like there are some playmakers, but I just feel like the weather and the lack of a running game is what is going to hinder Memphis. Give me 37-30 UCF, but it's going to be one of those games where it's not as close as the score indicates. I think UCF probably jumps out to a pretty good lead, and then it's just able to run the ball. My bold prediction, Memphis scores a special teams touchdown. There we have it. Some kind of special. I'm not going to go out on a limb and say, oh, Gabe Rogers is going to run 93 yards. It may be in the block game. It may be.
You are out on a limb, dude. Because
well,
I'm talking about.
But I will say,
well, so am I with the win prediction. So
a healthy Gabe Rogers has been close 3 or 4 times this year. He's been a couple of shoestring tackles away. But I just 37-30. I just think you now you got me doing it. UCF is the better team this week. Now that doesn't mean they're better every week, but I think this week. But I think, guys, that we will see early. Brian, I think you said it best. I think we will know early where the mindset of this team is. And we're all 3 big body language guys. We'll know pretty quick where Memphis stands, I think.
And if UCF big early lead, it's over. I don't see a chance for Memphis to come back. Memphis has got to stay with UCF in this game to have a chance.
And I told Brandon that. I said, this is going to sound absolutely insane, but Memphis doesn't need to get off to a big fast start. Like Memphis needs to just play the game, and to me, the worst thing that happens is Memphis jump out 21-3, 27, 28-10, something like that. Again, as crazy as that sounds, because that's been the Tigers' recipe for disaster. We're yet to see this team play 60 minutes. I just don't think it matters Saturday. I just feel like UCF is the better team this week. So just want a couple college football notes. Man, nothing going on at Auburn this week. They hired John Cohen from Mississippi State. Kind of an odd pick to me for Auburn if you're going to hire an athletic director. So the timeline was, I believe, they technically fired Harsin on Sunday night. And then, was it Monday night? It was Monday. They technically fired him on Sunday night. It got out Monday. Within hours, Cohen had apparently taken the AD job on Sunday. So they fired Harsin to keep from Cohen to have to fire Harsin. So Auburn is now, or Mississippi State is now obviously in the market for an athletic director. And one of the names that's been kind of frequently mentioned there is Laird Veach. He's got SEC experience, so I'm curious to see how that plays out. There are not enough dollars, and I know coaches are different, guys. I know they're wired differently. There ain't enough dollars for me to be the head football coach at Auburn. You talk about a bunch of crazy people. A bunch of insane people. Larry, that bunch at Auburn.
It's not that they're insane.
They have money too.
Well, yeah, they're rich, insane. But when you're rich, you're actually you're eccentric. You're not crazy. But anyway, here's the thing with Auburn. Is that Auburn really thinks that it should be Alabama. even though they've never been Alabama ever, and they've really never been Georgia, if we're completely honest. And, I understand rivalry. I do. But those people have a sickness there. And I think Jeb's probably right. Has broken. I think Saban did probably break Auburn to a degree, in a way, because they didn't have a Pat Dye at the same. Because back when Alabama sort of had, had their traditions going on, Auburn sort of had something going on as well. Auburn really hasn't. I mean, they won a national title, but they really haven't had, anything on their side. It's John. I'll be honest. You said that there's not enough money. I do wonder. I know who they think they can get, but I'm just wondering who. And I'll throw this up to you guys. Who do you think ultimately takes that job?
Dave Aranda at Baylor.
Man,
he's the guy. And everybody's argued with me about this, and I'm going to say it till I'm blue in the face. They can afford Hugh Freeze, and there is a part of Hugh Freeze that wants to get back in to the SEC. But for Jeb's right, there is always somebody ready to take a bag full of money.
I agree.
But my thing with a guy like Hugh Freeze is making north of $5 million a year. That's been reported. I've been told it is well more than that, with bonuses and endorsements and everything. I've been told it is well north of $7 million a year to coach at Liberty. People have no idea how much money Liberty has. He was a Christian. He is a conservative Christian. He is at a conservative Christian university. He doesn't have to win where he is. I mean, he's got to win, but he doesn't have to go 11-1 every year. He doesn't have to compete for, which conference are they in these days?
They're moving into CUSA, aren't they?
Yeah, or are they moving to the Sun Belt? Anyway,
No,
he doesn't have to win that league whatever league it is every year. And there's something to be said for being selective. Like, Justin wanted the first gig out of town at Virginia Tech. That was the first good gig that he could get out of town. Mike didn't want the first good gig out of town, but when Florida State calls, that's a job you pick up the phone and say yes before they change their mind. Hugh doesn't have to do that. Hugh could wait for the inevitable with Saban retiring at Alabama, and I don't care what they've said publicly. I think Dabo's the guy at Bama. He could wait for Clemson. He could wait for, you name the job. He could wait for Florida. He could wait for Florida State. He could wait. I mean, he's a guy that can pick his job. Like, he doesn't have to go get a job. He's got enough money, and he's proven himself. He has nothing to prove to anyone. But Auburn is a job where his ego could get the best of him, and he could go there. But I think as the type of guy he is, he doesn't strike me as a guy that is willing to throw himself back into the blender for, and this is going to sound crazy, for another $1 million. Like when you're making $6 million a year, even though it seems like a lot, another $1 million, what kind of headache is that worth? And that's what I keep thinking about the Auburn job is. It drove Christy Malzahn off the deep end. It drove Gus's wife off the deep end. It ruined a good man in Brian Harsin. It's ruined it. It drove Gene Chizik out of coaching. He will never want to coach again. The Louders and the rest of those crazy people down there have driven many a good man out of the business and a lot of good women out of the business. And I just don't know that Hugh is that kind of dude. Now, I tell you who I think is that kind of guy. If Lane Kiffin had one shot to mess with Saban once a year, he'd go to Auburn. Like that's I think the guy that's kind of the wild card, but he's making $7 million at Ole Miss. And
he doesn't have to look, they're crazy, but that's different level crazy. That's certifiable, people over so I think the bottom line here, and by the way, Dave Aranda, if you take that job, you leave Baylor for that job, you're a moron. He might do it, but he's a moron, because that's another anyway.
He'd be a rich moron.
No, it's a million times better job than Baylor.
I'm not
I tell you,
but
a young name to keep an eye on, Kenny Dillingham.
I could see that.
Auburn would burn Toomer's corner to the ground if they hired an offensive coordinator or a coordinator of any kind. Auburn is not going to do that.
Maybe.
And Jeb brings up a good point. He says money and titles is how football coaches measure themselves. And they always think that they can win wherever they are, that they're going to be the right guy. But how much longer do you think Saban's got? He's got to have at least another 3 years in him, right?
At least. I'd
maybe
say
2-3 years. I mean, he could coach till he's 75. Well, you're not beating Alabama. You might beat them, but you're not going. If you're at all right, who has a better shot at the college football playoff? The expanded 12 team.
I'm going to tell you right now, I have a
Memphis.
definite opinion on this, and that's if I am at Baylor, okay, give me a watered down Big 12. I'll run. I can win the Big 12 and give me a one-off against an SEC opponent, as opposed to trying to run that damn gauntlet, and it's a gauntlet. Because I'm going to tell you, I think there's going to have to be, if you're a coach, you got to look at it going, all right, and I just use Dave Aranda. I mean, you insert Big 12 school, okay? I understand that the university presidents want that guaranteed money that they get from the conferences, but if you're a football coach, give me a one-off all day. And if you're Campbell at Iowa State and you somehow finagle your way in, okay, and you got a one-off against Georgia, that's a hell of a lot better than playing Georgia, Tennessee, Florida, South Carolina, Alabama. Just give me a one-off. That's just my opinion on it. I'm sorry, but that's just me sitting back here going, give me if you got one game to win as opposed to 6, because look at what's about to happen in the SEC East. Tennessee's number 1 right now. They're number 1 right now. They got to go to Georgia. They could easily lose that. I think Georgia's picked to win this game, right? So Georgia wins. Tennessee will not even be in the SEC championship game. And they still might make the playoffs, but they will not be in the SEC championship game because Georgia's not going to lose 2 games. So now all of a sudden you're probably the second or third best team in the country, but you're not even going to get to play for it.
But if you got a 12-team playoff, what does that matter? I mean, that's the great equalizer to me, okay, is this 12 teams. Like that. That's the great equalizer. So if you're and I will fight you tooth and nail that the Big 12 is going to be watered down, because if the Big 12 is watered down, how the hell did they get $4 more million a year than they were getting with Texas and Oklahoma?
It's more watered down the SEC, John.
But that's the other side of this. The SEC jobs just got infinitely harder because of Texas and Oklahoma. So if you're the next coach at Auburn, you're sitting there thinking, all right, well, yeah, I don't have a great path. But if I'm going to go now before that happens. I'm going to go now. That way I can. I think I texted you guys this. My next career move is going to be fired Auburn football coach. It is very lucrative.
I'll go with you now. For 3 years.
I need a good DC. Brian, you're the OC. We're going in. But I just, back to you, Freeze. I don't think he takes it. I think Auburn is going to shoot. Auburn's going to learn who was it a couple years ago that had to learn that lesson? Oh gosh, it was one of these big schools just thought they could just go out and hire anybody. Tennessee, and that sounds familiar. They were going to hire Greg Schiano, and all was going to be right with the world, and then they had to down themselves and hire a lowly, moderately successful Central Florida football coach, Josh Heupel. I think Auburn's going to shoot for the moon and have to settle for the stars. They are going to back the Brinks truck up for Hugh Freeze. Whether that's a good move or not remains to be seen. And then they will back it up for Lane Kiffin. And then I think you've got to have the right temperament for Auburn. I think that's the important thing there is the right temperament. And to me, Dave Aranda is the guy that has that kind of wherewithal. All right. Well, that's more Auburn Tiger broadcast than we've ever had on this show. But there are now, and I asked this question on our message board, and I think if you remember to tune into this, there are currently, I think, 8 open FBS jobs.
Yep.
I'm going to miss one. Wisconsin, Arizona State, Charlotte, UAB, Auburn, Colorado, Nebraska. I think I'm missing one. So I'll ask you before we go, Brian, where do you put if again, hypothetically speaking, with a 12-team playoff, money, chance to win your league, expectation levels, where do you put the Memphis job?
I still put all P5s above Memphis. That's just me, because of the coach's mindset. I mean, how many besides, I guess Holgerson he left West Virginia, went to Houston. How many P5 coaches openly leave to go to a group of 5? It doesn't happen. So that's why, I mean.
Well, there are certain P5 jobs, like, for example, John and I have talked about this. Vanderbilt would be one where I would not. I would say that they're limited there in what only because of certain obstacles. But of the openings that you're talking about, Memphis would be way down on that list.
Really?
Yeah, I would say, obviously, better job than Charlotte.
I think this is a much better job than like Colorado. And again, I'm talking about the
opportunity to get to the college playoffs.
Yeah. So this isn't better than Georgia Tech. This isn't better than Colorado. Again, money is not equal. I understand that. I don't even know what Colorado or Georgia Tech is paying.
We're not talking about what you're going to pay the coaches, John. This gets into
money, fan base expectations, stability of program, path to the 12-team CFP, and the ability to win and compete for league titles.
Those are actually two different things, in my opinion. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. So it's much easier to get to the college football playoff at Memphis than it is to get to the college football playoff in Colorado. So in that sense, you're 100% right.
I mean, Colorado's going to pay a coach more, but
he's got a much rougher road.
Yes.
And right. So in terms of getting to the college football playoff, yeah, you could probably do it easier at Memphis than or at SMU or anyway. Boise, for example, would be a good example of but I don't know that means it's a better job. And I think that because I think that winning the Pac-12 a coach would much rather win the Pac-12 than win the American.
But I look at it from the perspective of that. I don't disagree with that. A coach would much rather win the Pac-12, but to win the Pac-12, to win the AAC that will be, not the AAC today, the AAC that will be is a much easier job
100% agreed.
than what the Colorado is going to have to do, or hell, Georgia Tech. They're going to have to be better than Miami, Pittsburgh, Clemson, Florida
But
State.
you don't have to win all. You don't have to win all those. If Memphis wins out because of this, the strength of schedule will be so weak. You're going to be 12th.
That
11th.
doesn't matter. You have a shot. It's okay.
You have a shot. You have a shot at one game. You don't
This
have a
goes
shot
back
at
to what
going
I said,
anywhere.
Brian. You got a one-off, and you're obviously
Yeah.
you're 12th. You got a one-off. I understand that the odds of pulling it off are really small, but still, you got a one-off, and you just go into it and just play balls to the wall. Hey, look, Memphis played, Penn State tough. We didn't win, but we played them tough, right? And my point in all this is you go in and you have a one-off game. But I think it's an interesting question, but I think that right now, Brian's bringing up a good point. The strength of schedule is going to be horrible. I don't say that horrible, but it's not going to be as good as it was. But anyway, it's an interesting question. I don't know how some coaches, I think, will look at that and go, yes, I'd rather be one of the top 3 G5 schools programs in the country as opposed to the 9th best program in the Pac-12.
Would 2007 John Calipari rather had been the head coach at Memphis or at, I don't know, Indiana?
Well, he was almost the head coach at North Carolina State, and Larry Brown told him, "Are you nuts? You're never going to get a freaking call at Duke or North Carolina, and you're going to be the third wheel every damn year. Why would you do that?" That's a truth. That actually happened.
2007 John Calipari, would he have rather been the coach at Memphis or at Indiana? Because to me, he's the ultimate example, right? He is the ultimate example of the money-hungry, grimy, grubby, sleazy sleazebag, but he's our sleazebag. So would he have rather been the coach? And I think we are getting to that point now that the college football playoff has expanded to 12, which I'm 100% against, but that's a whole entire other podcast. I just think the Memphis, Boise State, San Diego State. Somebody help me out here. Who's another G5 that's going to be?
I can see Appy State jumping up there.
Either Appalachian or Coastal.
UTSA.
That's probably, what's that, 5-6 jobs?
SMU will be in the conversation from time to time.
No. I have no belief in SMU. They've not done anything right since the 80s. All right, well, we've gone over an hour, so let's end it right here. Hey, come on over to the message boards at tigersportsreport.com. 901 for a year, Brian. That's still going on, right? The 901 special.
Still going
sign
on.
up, and you get more of our terrible opinions over there. Brian, what are you working on this week?
We will have, as usual, the comparison. Pro Football Focus. We'll take a look at their grades, compare them to UCF. We will have their starters against Memphis starters of how they were coming out of high school. What rank were they coming out of high school? So we'll have that comparison as well.
Rain, sleet, snow, or shine, I will be at Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium on Saturday for Memphis and UCF. And congrats to my friends Nate and Kelly. They are getting married this weekend, and I have the privilege on Friday of officiating their wedding. So I'm looking forward to that. Always enjoy doing that. And happy for those two kids, those two crazy kids, as I like to say. So for the best co-host in all the land, Larry Marley, Brian Moss, it's John Maddox signing off, saying we will see everybody next week, and thanks for tuning in.